The Genshin Impact version 4.0 live stream has just ended, and I wanted to talk about, obviously, the characters coming out for Genshin Impact version 4.0, which are Lyney, Lynette, and Freminet. They're all brothers and sister? Yep, that's basically how it is. They're brothers and sisters, obviously, to each other, and I'm really excited for them because it's going to take a main part of the story. We already know that Fontaine's going to have a lot of cool stuff. So today I really wanted to take a gander at their kits and kind of give my insight on all three of the characters. Now, of course, we know that Lyney and Lynette are coming out in part 1 of version 4.0, with Freminet coming out in part 2. And yeah, it's going to be really dope to kind of see their kits in action. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. Actually, before we do that, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button down below. It would really mean a lot. Trying to get to partner on YouTube. And also, you know, comment down below. What do you guys think about these characters? And don't forget also, I am sponsored by GamerSubs. If you guys use code TYSTRA at checkout, you get 10% off. I highly recommend it if you love a gluten-free, keto-friendly option to your energy drinks. So without any further delay, let's go ahead and dive in. Obviously, we have Lyney here. Lyney is a pyro bow user, and I'm pretty stoked about that. So we're not going to talk about how to level them up. We're going to talk about the kits first. Now, the first thing I want to talk about with Lyney is Lyney here actually has a charge shot like Ganyu, Yoimiya, Tighnari, and all them that has a 2 set. Let's go ahead and talk about that. While aiming, flames will run across the arrowhead before being fired. Different effects will occur based on the time spent charging. Charge level 1 fires off a pyro-infused arrow, dealing pyro damage, while the level 2 fires off a prop arrow that deals pyro damage, and upon hit, it will summon a Grin Malkin hat. When firing the prop arrow, and when Lyney has more than 60% HP, he will consume a portion of his HP to obtain a prop surplus attack, max 5 stacks, or prop surplus stack. This effect will be removed after the character spends 30 seconds out of combat. The lowest Lyney can drop through this method is 60% of his max HP. The Grin Malkin hat can taunt nearby opponents and attract their attacks. Each opponent can only be taunted by the hat once every 5 seconds. This hat will inherit a percentage of Lyney's max HP, which is why we lose HP for him to gain the hat. If destroyed, and if the duration expires, it will fire off a pyrotechnic strike at one nearby enemy, dealing pyro damage. One hat can exist at any given time, and his arc, which is a really cool concept that was just introduced. At certain intervals, the prop arrow will cause a spirit breath thorn to descend upon its hit location, dealing Fuma aligned pyro damage. Now, what's really cool about this is, again, it takes aggro off of you, basically, and I think that's really neat. Upon your level up of the skill, the actual hat can actually gain 152% of the HP, which is really, really sick. I think that's actually a pretty dope thing in general. HP cost, you're only going to be using about 20% of your max HP for Lyney to get that hat out, so that's not too bad. You could do the prop arrow twice before, you know, you have to worry about getting your health back, it seems. The duration for the hat is only about 4 seconds, so that's not too bad. Overall, the starting damage at level 1 is 212% damage, up to 503% of your damage. And the thorn damage goes all the way up to 65.44% of damage. So that's cool. I dig it. I think it's going to be really neat in general because you're going to be able to use different types of, I'd say, artifact sets in this case. Let's go ahead and go into the skill here, Bewildering Lights. Lyney does a flourish with his hat, unleashing a firework surprise. When used, he will clear all current prop surplus stacks and deal AoE pyro damage to opponents in front of him. So using those prop arrows is your biggest thing. So you want to have that speed of your prop arrow shots. Damage will be increased according to the stacks stacks cleared, and this will also regenerate Lyney's HP based on his max HP. That's important because you would have to use your prop arrows and skill in conjunction with each other. When the Grin Malkin hat created by Lyney is on the field, the fireworks will cause it to explode, dealing AoE pyro damage equal to that of the pyrotechnic strike. The damage dealt through the Grin Malkin hat in this way is considered charged attack damage. Now let's go ahead and talk about the skill damage. From level 1, you start out at 167.2% all the way to 397.1%. Skill damage bonus, you go all the way up to 126.35%, and your HP regeneration is going to be 20% per stack. So getting those stacks off is pretty good. You won't have to worry about having a healer with Lyney out there. The only downside is the cooldown is about 15 seconds, but I think that actually works out because you need 5 stacks to get the maximum output, and you need to fire 5 prop arrows, so that works out. Wondrous Trick, Miracle Parade. Unleashing his magic, Lyney turns himself into the Grin Malkin Cat that can move around quickly. When the Grin Malkin Cat gets close to opponents, it'll send flames falling down on them, dealing at most 1 instance of pyro damage to each opponent. When the duration ends, he will dismiss the Grin Malkin Cat and ignite fireworks that deal AoE pyro damage, summon 1 Grin Malkin Hat, and grant himself 1 prop surplus stack, which is dope because again, you could just go to the ultimate without having, or not ultimate, sorry, so used to Honkai Star Rail. You could go to the burst and actually activate that to get yourself an extra stack. So you could fire off 2 prop arrows, activate your burst to get your 3rd stack, and you could even just go with that and be able to work it. Skill damage, you're going from 154 at level 1 all the way to level 15, which is 365.75% of damage. Explosive firework damage, fantastic. It's a fantastic amount in my personal opinion. And I think honestly, the cooldown is not too bad. 15 seconds, you'll honestly get that back. Energy costs about 60 seconds, but 3-second duration is pretty low in my personal opinion. So that's pretty wild to me. But of course, this is not getting into the Ascension passives as well, which passive skills, if you go to your level 1, if Lyney consumes HP when firing off a prop arrow, the Grin Malkin Cat has summoned by the arrow will, upon hitting an opponent, restore 3 energy to Lyney and increase damage by 80% of his attack, which is pretty neato. On the second Ascension, when dealing damage to opponents affected by Pyro, Lyney will receive the following buffs. Base attack increases by 60%. Each Pyro party member other than Lyney will cause this effect to receive a further 20%. Lyney can gain a total of 100% increased damage to opponents affected by Pyro in this way. That's really cool because of the solid fact that we actually got to see a full Pyro team plus Kazuha in effect. So it makes sense how he would be able to get that little bit of amount. So you would want to run like a Zhangling and Bennett alongside Lyney to get the full thing of conclusive ovation. So definitely worth checking out. Now let's go ahead and talk about Lynette. Lynette is going to be a one-handed sword animo user. And honestly, her kit's going to be a little bit easier to understand in my personal opinion, at least from what I'm seeing, because we're only going to have to worry about the skill and the burst. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the skill first. The Enigmatic Feint flicks her mantle and executes the Enigmatic Thrust, dealing animo damage. When the Enigma Thrust hits an opponent, it will restore Lynette's HP based on her max HP, and a 4-second afterwards, she will lose a certain amount of HP per second. Based on whether you press or hold the ability, she will use Enigma Thrust differently. If you press it, she swiftly uses Enigma Thrust, and if you hold it, Lynette will enter the high-speed pilfering shadow state and apply Shadow Sign to the nearby opponent. When the high-speed state ends, Lynette will unleash her Enigma Thrust. If there is an opponent with Shadow Sign applied to them nearby, Lynette will approach them in a flash before using Enigma Thrust. A maximum of 1 opponent can have Shadow Sign at any one time. When this opponent gets too far from Lynette, the Shadow Sign will be cancelled. So that's the only downside, is that it's like Yelan's ability, but you can only do it to 1 opponent. So you have to do it quickly and get it going. If you use her arc at a specific intervals, Lynette will unleash a Surging Blade when she uses Enigma Thrust, dealing Osea aligned animo damage. Now, this Enigma Thrust can go from 268% damage all the way up to 636.5, which is pretty dope. Surging Blade, which is the arc, can go from 31.2% all the way to 74.1, depending on what your talent level up is. Surging Blade interval is about 10 seconds. And HP regeneration is 25% max HP all across the board. HP cost is about 6% across the board, so you're not going to see any differences in that. Hold max duration is 2.5 seconds, and the cooldown is 12 seconds. Now let's go into the Burst Magic Hat Astonishing Shift. Lynette raises her mantle high, dealing AoE animo damage using skillful sleight of hand to make a giant Boggle Cat box appear. The Boggle Cat box taunts nearby enemies, affecting their attacks, deals animo damage to nearby enemies at intervals. When the Boggle Cat box comes into contact with Hydro, Pyro, Cryo, or Electro, it will gain the corresponding element and additionally fire vivid shots that will deal damage from the element at intervals. Elemental absorption of this kind will only occur once during the ability's duration. So, of course, because she's Animo, she's going to activate Swirl, and that's where that becomes that certain type. So you really want to pair her with, you know, a DPS that is of a certain elemental type, i.e. Lyney would be a really, really good concept for that, alongside using Xiangling and, you know, Bennett as your sides to really capitalize on Lyney's ability. Now, the skill damage goes from 83.2% all the way up to 197.6%. The Boggle Cat box damage will go from 51.2 at level 1 to 121.6% damage. Vivid shot damage, 45.6%, will go all the way to 108.3. And of course, you got a 12-second duration across the board with an 18-second cooldown, which is very, very high in my personal opinion, with a energy cost of 70, which is not too bad. So I will give it that. Now let's take a look at the passive skills really quick. Sophisticated Synergy within 10 seconds of using the magic trick Astonishing Shift. When there is 1, 2, 3, or 4 elemental types in your party, all party members' attacks will be increased by 8, 12, 16, and 20% respectively. Now, this gives Lynette a little bit more synergy with other teams. It's not going to work really, really well with Lyney's team because you're only going to have 2 different elements with Animo and Pyro, but it still works out in favor of like the 4 different element typing, so it gives Lynette a lot more options. Props positively prepped after the Boggle Cat box summoned by Magic Trick Astonishing Shift performs elemental conversion. Lynette's elemental burst will deal 15% more damage. This effect will persist until the Boggle Cat box duration ends. That's pretty neat. Lynette looks like she's going to be overall a lot better in general for all teams instead of just one, and I really like that, especially since you get Lynette right out the gate. If you don't know from the stream that we talked about, if you're ranked 25, you get a free Lynette right out there, so that's really, really cool. Now let's talk about Freminet. Freminet is going to be a little bit later, obviously, in the update at part 2, so we're not too worried about it, but we're still going to talk about him. He is going to be a Cryo Greatsword user, so let's go ahead and talk about his skill, because there's not really much else that we need to talk about when it comes to his regular strikes. Pressurized Flow does an upward thrust that will deal cryo damage and cause Freminet to enter a Prez timer for 10 seconds. While Prez timer is active, his elemental skill will turn into Shattered Pressure. Shattered Pressure executes different sorts of attacks based on the pressure level of Prez timer and then cancels Prez timer. Level 1 unleashes a vertical cut that will deal cryo damage. Level 1 to 3 unleashes a vertical cut alongside Prez, dealing cryo damage and physical damage. Damage dealt scales based on the pressure level. Level 4 borrows the power of the fully pressurized Prez to deal physical damage. Meanwhile, normal attack, Flowing Eddies, will be replaced by Shattering Pressure. Prez timer, when Freminet uses normal attacks, he will also unleash Waves of Frost that deal cryo damage and increases Prez pressure level. The accompanying cryo damage dealt this way will be considered elemental skill damage. His arc, Fuma, at certain intervals after using the upward thrust, a Spirit Breath Thorn in the form of another upward thrust will be created, dealing Fuma aligned cryo damage. Now, this is a lot to take in. Freminet's kit seems very, very complicated. Upward thrust, or at least with these levels, depends on the actual. I need to know how we're gonna actually get these levels of pressure. So I'm very concerned, I guess, in that sense, on how we're actually gonna get those. But let's go ahead and talk about the damage. The upward thrust that you get from the levels, level 0, or no, not level 0, I think. You actually get it from, it's hard to tell. I think you are just getting it from the, in general. 83.04% to 197.22%. Frost damage, 7.16% all the way to 17%. That's going to be the frost damage that occurs over time. Level 0, you're starting out at 200.48% up to 476.14%, which is pretty nutty. Level 1 shattering pressure damage, 100.24% cryo with 248.69% physical damage, all the way up to 238.07% cryo with 115.63% physical. So he is going to be a dual element usage, which works out, I guess, in a sense, but I think it's going to be a little bit difficult, especially since you don't know what you're going to be entirely building for. I think you're going to mainly want to build for cryo though. Level 2, cryo damage at 70.17% with an 85.2% to physical, all the way upwards to 166.65% in cryo with a 202.36% in physical. And then of course level 3 is when you go strictly not strictly physical, but mainly physical. 40.1% cryo and 121.72% physical, all the way up to 95.23% cryo to 289.09 physical. That again is a lot, but then when you go to level 4, that's when you're strictly physical damage, going from 243.44% all the way to 578.17%. Again, it's tough because you got to figure out if you want to run a cryo build or a physical build, and that I feel like him and Chongyun benefit from physical builds, and it's just insane to me. What is with cryo greatsword users being physical? I don't get it. And if you don't know, Eula and Chongyun go physical as well. Spirit Breath Thorn damage goes from 14.4% all the way to 34.2%. The Thorn interval is at 9 seconds, and your cooldown is at 10 seconds. Now, the burst is obviously a lot less of explanation, but Shadow Hunter's Ambush unleashes a wave of untouchable cold, dealing AoE cryo damage, resetting the cooldown of the elemental skill Pressurized Flow, and causing Freminet to enter the sub-Newtonical Hunter mode for 10 seconds. When in sub-Newtical Hunter mode, his interruption resistance will increase and Pressurized Flow will obtain the following buffs. Normal attacks will give Pers 1 additional pressure stack, and the frost released by his normal attacks deal 200% of their original damage. This effect will be canceled when Freminet leaves the field. That's pretty simple, but pretty insane in my personal opinion when it comes to the actual ability. Skill damage, 318.4% all the way up to level 15, which is 756.2%. His duration is 10 seconds, his cooldown is 15 seconds, and the energy cost is only 60, which is a pretty reasonable energy cost. Now let's go ahead and talk about the Ascensions here. Saturation, Deep Dive when using Pressurized Flow, Shattered Pressure. If Pers timer has less than 4 levels of pressure, the cooldown of Pressurized Flow is increased by 1 second. That's pretty dope. It does make it a little bit easier for you to get to use your skill. Followed by Parallel Condensers. When Freminet triggers Shatter against enemies, the damage dealt by Pressurized Flow Shattered Pressure will increase by 40% for 5 seconds. I think that these kits are really dope. I'm actually pretty excited to try out Freminet because Freminet just seems very weird as a DPS. I've heard that he could be a glass cannon, so I'm pretty concerned about that. But if you're running someone like Lynette or Lyney, you might benefit, or not really benefit, but you might be okay. But I wouldn't run Freminet and Lyney with each other because of, you know, DPSs. You need to have Freminet on the field, and I think that Lyney is going to be one of those support DPSs. So you could probably run him in the slot too, with your Freminet as the main DPS, but we'll see. Lynette is going to be good across the board, and so I'm pretty stoked about that because I want a Fontaine character that I can run across the board. Overall, the kits, as you have seen, are really good, and I'm pretty excited for them because it seems like they're going to be useful, and I'm pretty excited in general when it comes to the kits of the other characters in Fontaine. That's the main reason why I wanted to cover these kits, because they seem unique and very different. I don't know if they're going to be like, meta defining, but they are going to be really cool, and I really like the fact that, someone like Lynette might be meta defining. She seems like she's going to be one of the top 4 stars in the game, depending on how well her kit works, but I don't know. That's just me guessing. I could be entirely wrong, and it's strictly opinionated, so if you disagree, let me know in the comments. Would love to hear y'all's opinion on it. But anyways, that's going to be it for today. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Love you all to death, and as always, we'll catch you in the next video. Please take care, be safe.